Once upon a time there was a good queen who was of above average physical appearance. Apparently this was important because it's always mentioned when speaking about queens in stories. The good queen longed for a child of her own, as queens in stories often do. One morning, as the snow fell silently on the surrounding countryside, the good queen accidentally pricked her finger on a sewing needle. Because, as we all know, queens spend their days sitting idly by windows and sewing. 3 drops of blood fell from the queen's finger onto the snowflakes below her window. They glistened and twinkled in the chill morning air. The good queen thought to herself, "Oh, how I wish I had a child of my own, with a complexion as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as coal." When the summer returned to the land, the good queen did indeed have a child of her own, a healthy baby boy whose hair was indeed as black as coal. His eyes were as dark as deep pools, and his complexion was dusky and warm. The good queen named him Cole Black and loved him with all of her heart. Alas, the good queen passed away, and her husband the king married again. His new queen was tall and striking, but she had a cold, cold heart. The cold queen had a magic mirror, and every morning she would go to her mirror and ask it, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And every day the mirror would answer, "In all the lands both far and near, only you, my queen, are the fairest, my dear." This pleased the cold queen because, as we all know, queens in stories are expected to be the best, the richest, and the most beautiful of all. The years drifted by, and soon Cole Black became an accomplished martial artist trained in the respected art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because self-defense is very important for everybody, especially for young princes living in uncertain times. Years of physical training had honed his young body, and now at the age of 16 he was of above average physical appearance, just like his mother, the good queen, rest her soul. On the morning of his 16th birthday, the cold queen pulled back the drape covering her magic mirror and asked the question, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" This morning the mirror responded, "In all the lands both far and near, Cole Black is now the fairest, I fear." This outraged the queen so much that she almost smashed her beloved magic mirror. The cold queen hatched an evil plot. She summoned the castle huntsman to appear before her and tasked him with taking Cole Black into the forest with him. Her instructions were, "Don't bring anything back apart from his heart." The next morning, Cole Black excitedly accompanied the castle huntsman into the forest. He wanted to bag his first big stag, and he chatted and laughed with the huntsman as they rode deeper into the forest. Upon reaching their destination, the huntsman felt guilt and shame at the thought of what he had been instructed to do to the friendly and likeable Cole Black. Instead, he warned Cole that the cold queen had ordered his death and that Cole should run away and never return to the castle. Stunned and confused at this information, Cole Black left his horse with the huntsman and jogged off deeper into the forest. The huntsman returned to the castle and brought with him Cole Black's horse and the heart of a freshly slaughtered stag. The cold queen accepted it and placed it on a silver platter on her dressing table to remind her of how clever she was. Cole Black jogged for hours until the sun began to fade from the sky. Up ahead, through weary eyes, he spied a simple cabin surrounded by trees. Cole Black went up to the cabin and knocked on the wooden door. There was no answer. He laid his hand on the door handle and pressed. It opened. He pushed the door open and crept inside the roomy, nicely furnished cabin. The first thing he noticed was that all of the furniture was very small, as if made for children. He crept quietly through the cabin, but no one was there. Cole Black was weary after his very long jog. He removed his boots and curled up on top of the covers of one of the 7 tiny single beds. Soon his weariness overtook him and he fell fast asleep. Sometime later, after the sun had set and the stars were twinkling in the sky, the owners of the forest cabin returned from their daily work extracting minerals from the nearby mines. As they entered their home, 7 pairs of eyes soon spied the stranger in their midst. Cole Black awoke with a start and found himself surrounded by 7 diminutive mineral extraction technicians still dusty from their day's work. and all staring at him as he lay on top of the covers of the bed that he had claimed. He jumped up and apologized profusely, wringing his hands as he explained to the seven about his flight from the Cold Queen's evil death plot and the fact that he was now without a home to call his own. The seven listened to his story and rubbed their chins ponderingly. After considering the inherent stranger danger involved, the seven suggested that if Cole Black was willing to cook and clean for them, he was welcome to stay in their cabin in the forest for a while. Cole agreed and began his new life the very next morning. Meanwhile, the Cold Queen went again to her magic mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" This time the mirror answered, "In all the lands both far and near, only one still holds that title, my dear." The Cold Queen was satisfied with this answer, and life went back to normal in the castle until one morning the Queen went again to her magic mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" This time the mirror answered, "In all the lands both far and near, Cole Black is still the fairest, my dear." Well, the Cold Queen turned purple with rage and immediately had the castle huntsman dragged before her to explain why the mirror would say such a thing. He cried and stammered and feigned ignorance, but the Queen knew he had lied to her and had him flung to his death from the tallest tower in the castle. She gathered together her best spies and instructed them to scour the land until they discovered the location of Cole Black. Before too long, the captain of the spies came to her with the news that Cole Black had been found. He was living in the forest with 7 diminutive mineral extraction technicians. The Cold Queen, who happened to be a witch, hatched a plot immediately. She transformed herself into a raggedy old beggar woman and went to the cabin in the forest with a basket of apples, each of which had been poisoned. She knocked on the door and Cole Black opened it. The disguised queen's eyes narrowed upon seeing her nemesis, but she stayed in character and sweetly offered Cole Black the apples as a tribute to his flawless beauty. Cole was a friendly young man, so he had no reason to suspect anything other than a genuine offer of kindness. He took the basket, thanked the old beggar woman, and selected a juicy-looking apple from the basket. Cole took a big bite and then immediately fell to the ground, clutching his throat and then passing into unconsciousness, because as we all know, that's how poison in stories works. Later that night, when the 7 diminutive mineral extraction technicians arrived home, they found Cole lying cold and still in their doorway. The cabin was dark and no one else was to be seen, just silence and sadness. The 7 mourned the loss of their dear friend and crafted for him a beautiful casket made from glass panels and gold. They placed the casket in a little clearing behind their cabin so they could visit the body of Cole Black and see him from time to time. A few days later, a prince from a distant land was passing through the kingdom when his hunting scouts came across the glass casket in the forest. They alerted their liege and he went to gaze upon the cold, still face of the fairest young man he had ever seen. The foreign prince ordered his men to collect the casket and place it onto his hunting wagon, which they did. While the men were loading the casket onto the wagon, one of them lost his grip and dropped his corner of the casket. There was an almighty bump as the corner hit the ground, and at that moment, the piece of poisoned apple which had been lodged in Cole Black's throat came flying out, and he began to cough and breathe again. Now at this point, one would expect Cole Black to storm the castle and take his revenge. However, he was a kind and gentle soul, and he knew that although he could beat the Queen 1v1 using his martial arts skills, it was not the right thing to do. As everyone knows, self-defense is for defense, and not for inciting violence. So instead he left the kingdom with the foreign prince, and together they started a Brazilian jiu-jitsu dojo of their own, where they could instill values of strength with restraint upon children and adults of all ages, and where no one had to be afraid to walk alone at night for fear of something nefarious happening to them. The Cold Queen contracted COVID-19 and passed away after a time. The king married again because that is what kings in stories do, and Cole Black was left to live out his days in peace and happiness, promoting his dojo's values and enjoying life as a respected member of the foreign kingdom he had adopted. And from that time forward, he lived happily ever after.